This episode is brought to you by Kraken Pro. Meet the all-new Kraken Pro, the powerful, customizable, beautiful way to trade crypto. It's Kraken's most powerful trading platform ever, built for lightning-fast trades and packed with features like advanced order management and analytics tools, all in a redesigned modular trading interface. Head to pro.kraken.com and trade like a pro. Cryptocurrencies are unregulated in the UK. Profits may be subject to capital gains tax, and the value of cryptocurrencies can go down or up.
Hello and welcome to Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm Becky Parker Geist and I'm your host. Audiobook Connection is your place to learn about the audiobook creative process in discussions between the authors, narrators, producers, and post-production teams that bring them all together, as well as guests who have listened to the audiobooks and have questions for the creative teams. This podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. And I'm really excited to have with me today Kelly Ann Manuel. She's an inspiring new author with a catalog of 31 modern-day nursery rhymes to her credit. The hallmarks that are consistent throughout her works are lyrical cadence, positive mantras, and healthy models of communication for all. Kelly, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Becky. It's such a treat to be here today and an honor to be interviewed. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my great pleasure. Let's jump right in. I would love to hear more about the origin story of the books that you've written. Tell us a little bit about what inspired you and how they came into existence in the first place.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So it's an interesting story because I'm what I call an uncommon author. And I only began writing in 2022. So about March 2022, beginning of April, I've been through some things in my life, and I worked really hard on those things that were difficult to get over, but I worked really hard on them. When I worked on them, I was able to achieve what I talk about being an inner and outer quiet. I had a quiet in my own self. And then at that time, I had a quiet in my external environment. The combination of the quiet internally and externally allowed me to hear poetry. It rose up into my awareness. And it was incredible because so many poems were coming. You know, I'd be walking the dog and typing into my notes on my iPhone. I'm like, oh, I think that's another poem. And I would be typing it, walking the dog, all these things. And gosh, so many came. And I just felt just a huge connection with, I guess, the universe, I would say. And what I realized were the poems were stories and that they were meant to be children's books. And so truly, when you take a poem and you take a children's book, it's a nursery rhyme. That's exactly what it is. And so then I heard the poems in my mind. I cleared away everything else and I had single purpose. And I just wrote and wrote, illustrated. And really in 14 days, I had 27 books that were ready to go to publisher.
That's extraordinary. And what's so interesting to me is as you talk about this quiet, I immediately thought, she was in a meditative state. And it sounds like it was an ongoing meditative state for you for a while, where you were in this very creative mode and tapped into the universe. People have different ways of thinking about life and all of that, and we'll leave that as an open. I also use the word universe, but we'll use that as an open term.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So would you say then that the challenges that you had experienced in your life, that whatever those were, that was what inspired you? Or do you think it was really more of that just being in that meditative place, that quiet?
It was a combination, because what I really begun to realize about the books is that what I call experiential. They are all about experiences. So you take my experiences, you take what I overcame, you take that I needed to be resilient, that I needed coping mechanisms. Then when I had the quiet, the two things came together to create the poetry and the story. So one without the other, just the experiences would not have been it. And just the inner and outer quiet would not have been. It had to be both. And the two married together, then the books were born.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about your background? What kind of what were you doing before you suddenly started writing?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I went to Indiana University and I did get a degree in telecommunications with a focus in marketing. So I always had a bit of a creative side. And I ended up working for General Electric for 5 years and ED&C. It's no longer ED&C, but it was a call center. And I worked my way up through the ranks there into a quality role for quality. But then I had my son. And when I had my son, I left GE. And I really didn't desire to ever return to a corporate type of job after my experiences there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I said, so that was it. I thought, gosh, if I could do anything after this, it would be nonprofit. That's what I always said. And then when Ryan was young, he was in preschool. So I went ahead and started teaching. That was a lot of moms did that at that time. And so I moved. Here's what I did, though. I moved up from teaching to administration. And I gained a lot of knowledge about childhood development, early childhood development, because to be in administration, you had to have that skill set. You had to take courses.
Right.
And I helped take a preschool through accreditation, which is a really tough thing called NACI. It's an accreditation process. But by taking the school through accreditation, I learned so much about child development.
Yeah.
And when I talk about meeting the child where they are, that is a NACI philosophy and really served me well now so then I did the preschool thing. And then my son, he had some health issues. He had some serious asthma and it really made it difficult to do a 5-day-week position. So I took some time off. And then our family did a lot of DIY. We did a lot of renovating and we did it ourselves. So for the majority then of my adulthood, I was invested in redoing properties, property management, everything that goes along with multiple properties and upkeeping them and actually doing the manual work myself, which it's funny because some of the books, you'll get a glimpse of that I did that kind of life because the book, The Still Bee, is about a bee that's pausing from its work because really I was busy buzzing like that busy bee all the time. And that book is a reflection of, hey, working all the time and being involved in projects are great as long as it's not all time. So what you'll find is my books will have features of my life, including some of my son's health issues and medical things. I have a book called The Away Cast, and there's some characters in there that children can call upon for support and for bravery. The characters are bravery and bolder. So every book you're going to find there is a thread back to something that I experienced. And I think, hey, let me take what I learned from the event and put it into a nursery rhyme for children.
Yeah. Nice. It's interesting. I also have a background in early childhood education and started as a mom in a co-op and then was teaching preschool and then moved into directorship and then started my own program. So I totally hear you. And that's funny. But what a cool thing then to have all of that background in early childhood education, because it really does inform so much now of the work that you're doing as an author. So that is very cool. Thank you for sharing that. Yep. Now, you have a few different series. You've got classics, Rainbow's End. Tell us about those. And I would love to hear from your perspective, what differentiates those from each other?
Of course. What's so interesting is when I wrote the books, they were not in categories. They were not separated out. I just wrote and created. When I went to submit them for publishing, I had to create synopsises for every book. In doing that, it hit me that they were falling into category. It's so crazy how it all happened.
I know.
So I'm like, okay, what should I call what this book feels like? And I'm like, this book feels like what I would call one of my classics. It's a classic. So my classics are what I call my most timeless books. They appeal to really any age group, even though they're written for children. And any age person can pick up a classic and they will glean something from that book. So they're timeless And they're layered. They're layered. There's a lot going on in them so that you can be purely entertained or you can go a little deeper. There's definitely layers to the classics, and the art can be similar in the classics. So you'll find a feeling of illustrations that are in each of the categories as well. Okay. Then the essentials. Then I had some other books and I thought, gosh, these are essential for children on a daily basis. So the essentials are all about positive self-talk. For an example, one of the books is The Morning Good. So I flip titles. Instead of Good Morning, it's The Morning Good. And it's just about saying, hey, the morning looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go ahead and take on my day. Something as simple as that. So the essentials are about kind of daily rituals, that positive self-talk that you want the child to be having with their own self as they take on the day. The essentials are really helpful for that. And they span a lot of different activities and experiences as well. And I use a lot of animals and the nature kingdom in the essentials, and it's really fun. I find animals and nature to be a thread throughout my books because I do feel like children can relate to them globally. And there's something that each child can find meaning in and take it and make it their own, but yet it's a connectedness for the globe. That's why I love to use animals and nature. Then I have what I call My Name Is. So what was happening is some of the poetry was starting out the same way. And that's the My Name Is series. And it takes the child and a narrator. And the narrator is either a mountain or a character I call Art Vine or a character named Wing. And it's about observation. And the child has a conversation with either Mountain or Art Vine or Wing, and they make observations. And then the character responds back. And it's a very civil modeling of discourse and just pure observation and be able to state, hey, this is what I see. And then give an opportunity for the other person or character, what have you, to say, hey, that may be what, but here's what's going on. Here's what I think is going on. And it's just, they're just delightful to have the back and forth. So those are My Name Is, and they're really special. And I know I've got more of those that I want to do. I've got more that I want to do in all the categories. Yeah. But then finally you have Rainbow's End. Like I said about the beginnings. So some of the poems all kept starting with, the other day I went to visit a friend who lives at the tail of a rainbow's end. So that became very clearly the Rainbow's End series. Right. And those books are to transport the child as well as the caregiver from everyday reality to pretend world, an imagination world. And what can happen at the end of the rainbow? It gives an author a lot of leeway to create events that have never occurred before, like, for example, the Boots Rain. So instead of rain boots, it's a Boots Rain. Where else can you have a Boots Rain but at the end of the rainbow?
Yeah. It's great. It's just delightful. Yeah. And each of these titles is offered individually. And I just want to let our listeners know that there will be one place where they'll be able to get a boxed set, if you will, of the audio books. And I will say actually, we'll just put the link in the description of the podcast. So listeners, you can grab it from there because it's a little long and probably won't be much help in terms of writing it down right now, but we'll have that available for you. And I want to come back to where you were talking about that wordplay with your titles, where you flip it around, because it's really intriguing. Tell us a little bit more about that decision and the wordplay in your books.
Honest to goodness, I think for me, it's about bringing something new to the table in children's literature. Taking something simple like a rain boot by simply changing and flipping a rain boot to a boot rain or a Boots Rain. It just gives such a different view of the world, almost upside down, backwards. And I just feel there's a need in children's literature right now for that, because I feel like children see the world differently than adults. So I guess a lot of the wordplay that I'm doing is inner child, from my own inner child. And having that playful idea of not the adult brain saying, oh, what should I title a book for a 4-year-old? But my inner child saying, oh my gosh, what if my rain boots that are on my feet today, what if they were falling from the sky instead of the rain? And, this inner child voice, that all the work I did allowed that inner child to really come out loud and clear. And that's, I think, a lot of my flipped titles. The case suit instead of suitcase. The case suit. It's just taking such a common, ordinary thing, flipping it, and giving it a fresh, new breath of life so that a child can be surprised, astounded, and then it can also allow them to start having playfulness in their own mind. And what would they flip? What would they do differently than what's already been given to them as this is how things are? You have a rain boot. It gives them permission to have some more play. So I'm trying to really set an example.
Yeah. Let's pause for a moment. We'll be right back. Here at Pro Audio Voices, we take a personalized approach to helping you get your project into audio. If you have a children's book and are exploring the possibility of putting it into audio, and you maybe have questions about how to approach it, or does it even make sense for your particular book, these are all things that we can help with at Pro Audio Voices. Just reach out to us at proaudiovoices.com/get-started, and you can book a call so we can talk. If you'd like to just gather some information from the website, go to proaudiovoices.com/children's audiobooks. We're here to help great stories come alive and work with you to help yours have a greater impact in the world. Let's talk a little bit about the audiobook process. Let's start with, I'm thinking about the music and the sourcing of the music. And I had the great delight to be able to be at first, let's find some pieces that feel like they would fit. And then it just felt like we were so in alignment on that. What was that experience like for you?
Oh, Becky, I knew the moment I met you that you were going to make music of my books and that you were going to turn them into pure lyrical magic. I knew it. I knew it the moment I met you. And I certainly found that it followed through the second I got the music from you. Yeah. And what was great was somehow you were, it was 31 books. That's a lot of books. Yeah. Okay. And they're all children's books. They're all adventure. They all have an adventure sense to them, but you were still able to find unique music that was suitable to not only the title, but the art and the poetry. And it felt so organic and simple because it felt like you understood on a vibrational level what the books were trying to do, what I was trying to do as an artist. You took your art and your artistry and you married it with mine. Yeah. And I found it to be just complete enjoyment.
Oh, good.
Yeah. It's great.
Now, there was one title that was interesting for me in this very process of the music that I wasn't fully figuring it out. And that was My Name is Mountain. And I remember so well that conversation and asking you to talk to me a little bit more about what was happening in that dialogue. And once I got it, I was like, oh, okay, yes. And then being able to find the right music for that. Do you remember that moment?
I do. In fact, I get a little bit of chills when you bring that up because My Name is Mountain was my first. And I've said in other interviews, when My Name is Mountain came, I thought I was having an only child. Because at that point, I hadn't written anything else. I'm like, oh, I have an only child and it's My Name is Mountain. Next thing you know, there's 30 more children. So My Name is Mountain. I talked about how I was doing work on myself. And there was a journal prompt healing program that led me to write My Name is Mountain. And My Name is Mountain is, I said about my books having layers, right? So first and foremost, entertainment. Of course, that the rhymes are important for children for learning and for literacy. Then there's going to be other layers to the books. And My Name is Mountain has several. One is clearly going to be the environment. The idea that mountain was a mountain. And now the child is saying, you're not a mountain anymore because you look like a hole. And that the mountain felt it was doing its job and it was doing its job so well that everybody was taking a pebble from its base to their home to exhibit because it was doing such a good job. And little by little, the mountain was no longer a mountain, even though it believed it still was. And the child is observing that. So part of that is saying, hey, we just can't take, right? We just can't take from nature. And there's got to be a balance. So that, of course, for me, on an environmental Earth Gaia mindset, right?
Yeah.
But then if you take it another step further, there's the idea of your own internal self and mountain. And are you giving yourself away little by little? There's things like social media, and it's starting so young now. And if you look at social media as maybe giving a little pebble away each time of yourself, will you stay that tall and strong mountain, or will you start to erode?
Mm-hmm.
So see, when I talk about multiple layers to the books, that's an example.
Yeah. I loved what you said earlier about that series as you were identifying that series and the observation. I love the way you model that we can observe, we can share our experiences, and we don't have to make that into a judgment. It doesn't have to be, no, you're not a mountain. It's what I see is you look like a hole. So that, and it's such a lovely, gentle way to model that. Because I think that in our society in general, we're so caught up with, I need to be right, someone else needs to be wrong. And if I see it this way, that means that's the way it is, when that's not true at all. Of course, every person sees things, experiences things in their own very unique way. So bringing this kind of model forward, I think is beautiful and such a gift of your work. So thank you.
That means a lot to me. I do say I felt so single-minded to get these books out.
Yeah.
And I believe it has a lot to do with timing.
Yeah.
And when you talk about what goes on in the world and what goes on in discourse, the books came now for a reason.
Yeah.
They came for children now.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be wonderful if the caregivers also gleaned something from the books at the same time?
Yeah. Now, when you were suddenly writing and having all these book babies, did you know at the beginning that they were going to be audiobooks too?
No. I felt this lyricalness to them. Mm-hmm. I kind of describe my experience with the books as the movie Field of Dreams, where you build it, they will come. Right. And remember how he was like, oh, I'm going to build something. Everybody was like, what are you doing? The books were very much like that. They came in such an organic way that I didn't have a lot of foresight. I just did what the inspiration felt like in the moment. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what happened with audio. Yeah. When I was starting to look into PR, and when I was ready for that, and then Black Chateau Enterprises, my great PR firm.
They're wonderful.
When I met with Desiree, with the owner, I said, I feel these need to be audiobooks. And she said, well, I have the company for you. And of course, it was you, Becky, and your company. And like I said, when I met you, I knew automatically that you would do the audiobooks. So it was just kind of a little bit of a journey.
Yeah.
And I just would get inspiration and intuitive hits on when to do things. Yeah. And that's exactly how I found you. And it was perfect because had I researched it before I met Desiree, I don't know that I would have found you. You're out in Oregon and South Carolina. So do you see how this all ends up being very
connected? Yeah.
Yeah. Like
I do.
Special.
Yeah.
And that's being really special. Yeah. So I'm grateful for that. Yeah. But once I met you, I knew, oh my gosh, this has to happen and it has to happen now.
Yeah. What would you say is your sort of target audience age range?
Yeah, for sure. It's 4 to 8.
Okay.
Let me rephrase. The essentials. Okay. 8-month-old baby responding to the essentials. Mm-hmm. Okay. The morning good has polar bears in it, right? And the baby with the pudgy fingers pointing to the art in the morning good. 3-year-old, I've had 3-year-olds respond to the classics. So honestly, really, I'd say from the essentials are probably 8 months and up, but I would say the classics more are 3 and up. Uh-huh. And the others, the My Name Is are more in the higher end of that 4 to 8 genre, I would say, because they're a little more complicated. And then my name is Rainbow's End is really any time. But when you're doing books and you have to choose a genre to market.
Right.
And so I chose 4 to 8 for sure as my general age group for sure.
Yeah, that sounds good. And so what would you like people who have those young children, approximately that age range, in their lives? Because they're not always parents. Sometimes they're grandparents or other friends, whatever, nieces, nephews. What would you like them to know about your books?
That they'll become a staple. They'll get reread and worn out. And I said in one interview, to see a worn out book of mine would be quite a wonderful sight to see.
Yeah.
I'd love to see one of my books really worn out. And they have that kind of staying power. And they will, every child in the household, as different as every child in the household may be, the books will speak to them on some level and meet them where they are. So the value is just clearly there. Yeah. And I see the books being handed down generationally. Yeah. That's what I see. Yeah. All 31. Well, I did 31 so that there would be one for every day of the month.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hear the bedtime story. The lights go out and the story is playing, or you're in the car and the story is entertaining the kids. Yeah. So many wonderful things.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I've even thought about people that are separated. And you know how we had stuff with health reasons where people were separated, but you could use a phone or an iPad. Yeah. And to have the books, audio, video, the adult can still interact with the child while that's going on. Yeah. And then they can also read the book over that way as well and still have that connection. Yeah. Because what the book's going to do is it's going to give the child, I find they actively participate with my books. It is not passive. Mm-hmm. So you're actually creating a bond with the child and the book simultaneously.
Yeah. And now we've got we're in the works with video versions of the books, which are now going to take it to yet another level where we have the audio with the music, the sound effects, and a wonderful narrator, Phil Shane, and your visuals from your book. So how exciting is that? I think it's
I'm telling you, it gets better and better, Becky. Yeah. It gets better and better. Yeah.
And I just want to give a shout out to Riverview Studios that is creating those videos in collaboration with Pro Audio Voices. Yeah. And so those will be available as well. So you've got the full coverage, as we might say.
That's how I roll, Becky.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, Kelly, I want to thank you so much for taking this time to hang out with me and bring us into the behind the scenes for your books. Thank you.
Well, it's an honor, a privilege to work with you, Becky. Everything you've done in your life really resonates with me. And I really appreciate and want to honor that right now and say thank you.
Thank you. Well, I guess we will wrap it up for this time. Again, just thanks for being with me. And thank you for creating such wonderful works and bringing them into the world.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. Please take a moment to subscribe at audiobookconnection.com. The podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Learn more at proaudiovoices.com. Again, thanks for being with us, and please join us next week.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.